Whispers followed her down the aisle. Everyone called her a climber, a nobody from nowhere who snagged the sterling heir to pay off debts. Tabloids branded her the waitress who won the lottery, while his terrifying mother deemed her disposable. But everyone made a fatal mistake. Staring at her cheap shoes, they missed the billion-dollar signature on the prenup. She didn't even read. People assumed she married for money, but they were wrong. She is the money. This is the story of how a quiet girl bought her husband's empire and the shock on their faces when the truth dropped. The champagne in the crystal flute was vintage Dom Perignon, 1996. But to Isla it tasted like battery acid. She stood near the edge of the ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, her back pressed against the cool, gilded wall. The air smelled of expensive perfume, Chanel No. 5, Santal 33, and the distinct metallic scent of old money. Her dress, a simple, off-the-rack silk slip she'd found at a vintage store in Brooklyn for $200, felt criminally underdressed amidst the sea of Vera Wang and Oscar de la Renta. "Look at the hem," a voice whispered nearby. It wasn't really a whisper. It was a stage whisper designed to be heard. "It's practically fraying. Did she make it herself?" "Liam must be out of his mind," another voice drawled. "I heard she was working at a diner in Queens when he found her. A literal diner. Can you imagine?" Isla didn't turn. She kept her eyes fixed on the center of the room, where her new husband, Liam Sterling, was being cornered by 3 board members of Sterling Enterprises. Liam looked dashing in his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, but he also looked tired. He kept glancing over the heads of the billionaires searching for her. When their eyes finally locked, he offered a small, apologetic smile. Isla returned it, gripping her glass tighter. "Just get through tonight," she told herself. "Just get through the speeches." But the night wasn't about the speeches. It was about the execution. And the executioner was currently tapping a silver spoon against a baccarat crystal glass. Victoria Sterling, the matriarch of the Sterling family, and a woman whose smile could freeze the Hudson River, stood at the head table. The room went silent. You could hear the ice melting in the buckets. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, her voice smooth and polished like a stone tumbled in a river of gin. "Tonight, we celebrate unexpected choices." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. "My son Liam has always been a charitable soul." Victoria continued, her gaze landing squarely on Isla. It wasn't a warm look. It was the look a hawk gives a field mouse before the dive. "He has a heart that seeks to rescue, to uplift. And isn't that what marriage is in some cases? A rescue mission?" The silence in the room became suffocating. Beside Isla, a man in a velvet blazer coughed awkwardly. "To Isla." Victoria raised her glass, her eyes glittering with malice. "May you find everything you were looking for in this marriage. Comfort, security, and of course a warm bed to sleep in, which I understand is a significant upgrade from your previous arrangements." The room gasped. It was subtle, but it was there. Victoria had just publicly called the bride homeless. Liam stepped forward, his face flushing red. "Mother, to the happy couple!" Victoria shouted over him, draining her glass. Isla felt the tears pricking her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She took a sip of her champagne, her hand steady. She had faced boardrooms in Tokyo that were more hostile than this, though Victoria didn't know that. Nobody knew that. To them, she was Isla Evans, the girl with the mysterious background and the cheap shoes, the girl who had trapped Liam Sterling. The narrative had been set 6 months ago, the day Liam brought her home to the Sterling estate in the Hamptons. Isla had met Liam at a coffee shop near Central Park. It was a cliché, really. He had spilled an iced Americano on her laptop. He insisted on paying for the repairs. She insisted it was fine because the laptop was old and barely working anyway. That was a lie. It was a secure, military-grade encrypted terminal disguised as a beat-up Dell. But he didn't need to know that. They started talking. He didn't tell her he was the heir to a shipping and logistics empire. She didn't tell him she was the silent founder of Aurora, a tech conglomerate that specialized in AI logistics and currently owned the patents Sterling Enterprises desperately needed to stay afloat. He thought she was a freelance graphic designer struggling to make rent. She let him believe it because for the first time in 10 years, someone liked her. For her, not for her stock portfolio. But the fairy tale phase ended the moment the engagement ring, a modest, beautiful sapphire, went on her finger. The prenuptial agreement, Victoria had declared 3 weeks before the wedding, slamming a leather-bound document onto the mahogany table in the Sterling library. Isla sat across from her wearing jeans and a sweater. Victoria was in a Chanel suit that cost more than the average American car. Flanking Victoria were 2 lawyers from the firm, Cromwell and Sullivan. They looked like vultures in Italian suits. "This is standard procedure, Esla," Victoria said, lighting a slim cigarette. "To protect the family assets. In the event of a divorce, you leave with what you came with, which, according to my private investigators, is a Honda Civic with 120,000 miles and a savings account containing less than $4,000. One of the lawyers, a man named Mr. Henderson, pushed the document toward Isla. "It also stipulates that you will not have access to Mr. Sterling's personal accounts, nor will you receive alimony if the marriage lasts less than 10 years. Furthermore, there is a gag clause. You cannot discuss the Sterling family finances with the press." Isla looked at the document. It was thick. Hundreds of pages of legalese designed to strip her of dignity. "And if I don't sign?" Isla asked quietly. "Then there is no wedding," Victoria said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Liam might think he loves you, but he won't give up his inheritance for a fling. Be smart, girl. Take the security. Being Mrs. Sterling opens doors. Don't get greedy." Isla picked up a pen. She didn't flip the pages. She didn't ask for a lawyer to review it. She didn't even pause. She flipped to the last page and signed her name in a quick, fluid scrawl. Isla Evans. The room went dead silent. Mr. Henderson blinked. "Mrs. Evans, surely you want to read the terms." "There are clauses here that I don't care about the money," Isla said, capping the pen. She looked Victoria dead in the eye. "I'm marrying Liam because I love him. You can keep your money, Victoria. I have enough of my own worries without taking on yours." Victoria laughed, a sharp barking sound. "Your own worries, like making rent? Oh, you are bold, I'll give you that. Stupid, but bold." Isla stood up. "Are we done?" "For now," Victoria said, snatching the document. "But mark my words, I know what you are, and I will be watching every penny you spend." Back at the reception, the music had shifted to a slow jazz number. Liam finally extricated himself from the board members and found Esla. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. He smelled like cedarwood and champagne. "I'm sorry about her," Liam whispered into her hair. "I should have stopped the toast." "It's fine, Liam," Isla said, resting her head on his shoulder. She's just protective. She's a shark, Liam corrected. But I don't care. Let them talk. We have the honeymoon tomorrow. 2 weeks in Bora Bora. Just us. No board members, no mothers. Isla smiled, but her mind was racing. Bora Bora. She had a scheduled video conference with the Prime Minister of Singapore in 3 days regarding a smart city infrastructure deal worth $40 billion. She hadn't told Liam yet. She'd have to fake food poisoning to take the call. I love you, Mrs. Sterling, Liam said, kissing her forehead. I love you too, she replied. Suddenly a commotion near the entrance of the ballroom drew their attention. The heavy oak doors swung open and a man walked in. He didn't look like a wedding guest. He was wearing a dark grey suit that was cut too sharp, too precise. He carried a distinct titanium briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. He had an earpiece in. The room quieted down again. People were confused. Was this entertainment? A magician? The man scanned the room. His eyes scanning faces with robotic precision until they landed on Isla. He walked straight toward her, ignoring the waiters and the shocked guests. Victoria stepped into his path. Excuse me. Who are you? This is a private event. The man didn't even look at Victoria. He gently but firmly stepped around her, walking right up to Isla and Liam. Isla, do you know this guy? Liam asked, his body tense. The man stopped 3 feet from Isla. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of immense respect, bordering on reverence. Madam, the man said, his voice deep and accented, perhaps Swiss or German. My apologies for the interruption, but the situation in the Zurich markets has destabilized. The Harrington Trust is threatening to liquidate the assets unless they have your biometric authorization within the hour. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. What is he talking about? Victoria demanded, marching over. Security! Get this lunatic out of here! Isla's face went pale. Not from fear, but from annoyance. Lucas, she hissed. I told you, I am unavailable until the 25th. The Protocol 7 override was initiated, Madame, the man named Lucas said, holding up the briefcase. They need the key, now, or the merger collapses. Merger? Liam looked at Isla, confused. Isla, what? Merger, who is this? Isla closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The masquerade wasn't supposed to end like this. Not here. Not in front of Victoria. Isla, Victoria sneered. Is this a debt collector? Did you drag your loan sharks into my son's wedding? Isla opened her eyes. The warmth was gone. The shy diner girl demeanor evaporated. She stood straighter, her posture shifting into something regal, commanding. Lucas, Isla said, her voice dropping an octave cold and authoritative. Unlock the case. Isla, Liam asked, stepping back. I'm sorry, Liam, Isla said, looking at her husband. I tried to keep work out of this. Work, Victoria laughed. What work? Flipping burgers. Lucas unlocked the briefcase. Inside was not a summons or a bill. It was a sleek black glass tablet and a retinal scanner. Isla placed her hand on the tablet. It glowed blue, projecting a hologram into the air above the briefcase. Charts, graphs, and live stock tickers floated in the air, spinning rapidly. At the top of the projection, a logo pulsed, Aurora Holdings. The guests gasped. Everyone in the room knew Aurora Holdings. It was the most secretive, wealthy private equity firm in the world. They owned half the tech sector. Authorization confirmed, a robotic voice announced. "Welcome back, Chairwoman." Isla tapped a few commands into the hologram, her fingers moving with blurring speed. "Execute the buyback, liquidate the Swiss accounts and funnel the capital into the Harrington acquisition. And tell the Prime Minister I'll call him back in 20 minutes. "Done, Madame," Lucas said. The hologram vanished. He snapped the case shut. Isla turned to face the room. The silence was absolute. Victoria's mouth was hanging open. Liam looked like he had been struck by lightning. Isla smoothed her cheap dress. "Now," she said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Does anyone else have a toast they'd like to make?" The silence in the Plaza ballroom didn't last. It shattered like a dropped vase, replaced instantly by a roar of confused whispers, the clinking of silverware, and the frantic clicking of cameras as the wedding photographer, sensing a Pulitzer moment, began snapping photos of Victoria Sterling's face. Liam grabbed Isla's hand. His grip was tight, his palm sweating. "Isla," he said, his voice straining to be heard over the rising din. "We need to go, now!" He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled her through the crowd, past the gawking socialites and the stunned board members, dragging her toward the service exit. Lucas, the man with the titanium briefcase, followed close behind, moving with the lethal grace of a jaguar. They burst into the private bridal suite on the second floor. Liam slammed the door and locked it. The sounds of the party were muffled instantly. Isla pulled her hand away, rubbing her wrist. She looked at Liam. He looked like a stranger. The adoration that usually filled his eyes was gone, replaced by a concoction of confusion and betrayal. "Aurora Holdings," Liam asked, his voice shaking. "You own Aurora Holdings, the company that just bought the entire Port Authority of Hamburg last week." "I founded it," Isla said softly, stepping out of her heels. She winced. Her feet were killing her. 10 years ago, in my dorm room at MIT. MIT, Liam laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You told me you went to community college for design. You told me you worked at a diner." "I did work at the diner," Isla said, walking over to the vanity to wipe off her lipstick. "I bought the diner, Liam. I bought the whole block. I work shifts there on Tuesdays because it grounds me. It reminds me of where I started before the algorithms took off." Before Liam could respond, the door to the suite rattled violently. A keycard beeped and the door swung open. Victoria Sterling stormed in, followed by her 2 lawyers. She looked like a hurricane in Chanel. "Fraud!" Victoria screamed, pointing a manicured finger at Isla. "This is fraud marriage by deception annulment. I want an annulment filed tonight." She turned to her lawyers. "Get the papers. She lied about her assets. That voids the contract." Isla turned around, slowly. She picked up a glass of water and took a sip. "Actually, Victoria," she said, her voice cool and level, "it doesn't." "You lied on a legal document," Victoria spat. "Did I?" Isla walked over to where her purse was stashed and pulled out her copy of the prenuptial agreement. She tossed it onto the coffee table. "Page 4, Section B, Paragraph 12. The signatory is required to disclose all debts and liabilities. I have 0 debts. I have 0 liabilities." She tapped the document. "Page 5, Section C. The signatory waives all rights to Sterling family assets." "I signed that. I don't want your money." Isla smiled, a dangerous, shark-like smile that mirrored the one Victoria had given her earlier. "Nowhere in this document does it ask me to list my assets. You were so obsessed with making sure I couldn't take your millions you forgot to ask if I had billions of my own." "Mr. Henderson." The lawyer picked up the contract, his hands trembling. He scanned the pages. He looked up at Victoria, his face pale. She's right, Mrs. Sterling. The contract is purely defensive. It protects your assets from her. It doesn't legally require her to disclose wealth if she isn't seeking spousal support. Victoria's face turned a shade of purple that clashed horribly with the room's decor. "Get out!" she hissed at the lawyers. "Get out!" The lawyers fled. Victoria turned on Liam. Did you help her humiliate me?" "I didn't know anything," Liam shouted, finally losing his temper. He looked at Isla, his eyes watering. "Why didn't you tell me 6 months, Isla? We talked about rent. We talked about budgeting for groceries. I paid for your subway pass. Was that a joke to you? Was I a charity case?" "No." Isla stepped forward, reaching for him, but he flinched away. "Liam, please. In my world, everyone wants something. Everyone is pitching a deal. Everyone sees a dollar sign, not a person. When I met you, you didn't know who I was. You treated me like a human being. I wanted to live in that bubble a little longer. I wanted to be sure you loved me, not the chairwoman." "Well, congratulations," Liam said, his voice cold. "You tested me, and I passed. But you failed. You built our entire marriage on a lie." "It wasn't a lie," Isla pleaded. "It was an omission." "You let my mother humiliate you," Liam said. "You let everyone treat you like dirt. Why?" "Because," Isla said, her gaze hardening. "It's easier to see where the knives are coming from when people think you're defenseless." Victoria let out a short, cruel laugh. "Well, isn't this touching? But here is the reality, darling. You might have money, but you are still trash. And you just embarrassed the Sterling family on a global scale. I will destroy you." Isla turned to her mother-in-law. The sadness vanished from her eyes, replaced by the steel of a woman who managed $1 trillion portfolio. "Victoria," Isla said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "Aurora Holdings currently owns the lease on this hotel. We own the mortgage on the Sterling Tower. And as of this morning," Isla glanced at Lucas, who was standing silently by the door. "Lucas, did the acquisition go through?" "Yes, madame," Lucas said. "We acquired 51% of the Class B voting shares of Sterling Logistics via shell companies in the Cayman Islands over the last 4 months. Isla looked back at Victoria. "As of this morning, I am your boss. So if I were you, I would be very careful about who you threaten. I don't fire people, Victoria. I liquidate them." Victoria stumbled back, clutching her chest. For the first time in 40 years, the matriarch of Manhattan was speechless. Liam looked at Isla with a mixture of horror and awe. "You bought my family's company?" "I saved it," Isla said. "Sterling Logistics is insolvent, Liam. You're hemorrhaging money. Your mother has been cooking the books for 5 years to hide the losses. I bought the debt to stop the bank from seizing your assets." Liam stared at his mother. "Is that true?" Victoria didn't answer. She just glared at Isla with pure, unadulterated hatred. "I need air," Liam said. He turned and walked out the door, leaving his new bride and his mother alone in the room. Isla watched him go, her heart breaking. She had won the war, but she had just bombed the peace. 72 hours later, the honeymoon in Bora Bora was officially cancelled. Instead of a private beach, Isla was sitting at the head of the massive obsidian conference table on the 50th floor of the Sterling Tower. The view of Manhattan was breathtaking, but nobody was looking out the window. The 12 members of the Sterling Board of Directors sat in terrified silence. At the far end of the table sat Victoria, looking haggard but defiant. Liam sat to her right wearing a suit that looked like he'd slept in it. He refused to make eye contact with Isla. Isla wore a white Alexander McQueen power suit, sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't look like the diner girl anymore. She looked like a predator. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Isla said, tossing a thick file onto the table. "I've had my auditors go through the sterling ledgers over the weekend. It's worse than I thought." "You have no right to be here," Victoria snapped. "This is a hostile takeover." "It's not hostile, Victoria. It's necessary," Isla replied calmly. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up. A red line chart plummeted toward the floor. "Sterling Logistics is 3 months away from bankruptcy," Isla explained to the board. "You've ignored the shift to AI-driven supply chains. You're still using diesel fleets when the market has moved to electric autonomous transit. And—" She paused, looking directly at a balding man in the corner. "CFO Marcus Thorne has been funneling $3 million a year into a shell corporation in Panama." The CFO turned white. That's preposterous." "I have the wire transfers, Marcus," Isla said. "Lucas has already sent them to the SEC. The police are waiting in the lobby." 2 security guards entered the room. Marcus Thorne stood up, knocking his chair over, and was escorted out in silence. The rest of the board shifted in their seats, terrified they were next. "Now," Isla continued as if nothing had happened, "here is the new reality. Aurora Holdings is injecting $500 million into Sterling Logistics to modernize the fleet. In exchange, I am taking the chair position." "I am the chair." Victoria slammed her hand on the table. "Not anymore," Isla said. "The bylaws state that any shareholder with over 50% equity appoints the chair. That's me. You can keep your seat on the board, Victoria, as a courtesy to Liam. But you have no voting power." Victoria stood up, her hands trembling. "I built this company. You inherited this company," Isla corrected her. "And you ran it into the ground. Sit down." It was a command, not a request. Victoria looked around the room for support. None came. Defeated, she sank back into her chair. Isla turned her attention to Liam. "Liam, I want you to head the new renewable energy division. You've been pitching green initiatives for years, and the board shut you down. Now you have the budget. Build the fleet you wanted." Liam looked up. He looked surprised. You read my proposals?" "I read everything, Liam," Isla said softly. "They were brilliant. You just needed the capital." For a second, the ice in Liam's eyes thawed. He saw the girl he fell in love with, the one who listened to him talk about solar panels for hours in that coffee shop. But then he looked at his mother's devastated face, and the wall went back up. "I'll review the offer," Liam said stiffly. "Good," Isla said. She stood up. "Meeting adjourned." As the board members scrambled to leave, Isla remained standing by the window. She felt a presence behind her. It was Liam. "You're good at this," he said. "Destroying people." "I'm saving your legacy, Liam," she said, turning to face him. "Your mother was going to lose everything. The house, the name, everything. I stepped in." "Did you marry me for this?" Liam asked. The question hung heavy in the air. "To get a foothold in the company. Was I just an acquisition strategy?" Isla felt a sharp pain in her chest. "I married you because you were the only real thing I found in this city. I hid who I was because I didn't want this." She gestured to the boardroom, to be us. "I wanted to be Isla and Liam, not Aurora and Sterling." "Well," Liam said, checking his watch. "You can't unring a bell, Isla. I'm staying at the penthouse in Tribeca. I think..." I think we need some time apart. He walked out. Isla watched him go, fighting the urge to throw her heavy crystal pitcher through the window. She had just acquired a legacy company, fired a corrupt CFO, and neutralized her mother-in-law. It was the most successful business day of her life, and she had never felt more alone. 2 weeks passed. The Cinderella billionaire story was dominating the news cycle. Forbes had already put Isla on the cover with the headline, "The $1 Trillion Bride." Liam was burying himself in work at the new division. He and Isla spoke only through assistants or during stiff, formal board meetings. Meanwhile, Victoria Sterling had gone underground. She wasn't attending galas. She wasn't seen at her usual lunch spot at Le Bernardin. Everyone thought she was licking her wounds. They were wrong. She was sharpening her fangs. Isla was working late in her office at the Aurora headquarters, a converted warehouse in Brooklyn that looked like a spaceship on the inside. It was 11 p.m. Lucas walked in, looking grim. "Madam, we have a problem." "Stock price?" Isla asked, not looking up from her screens. "No." "Reputation," Lucas said. He placed a tablet on her desk. It was a live stream from a gossip channel. A man was speaking, a sleazy British journalist, known for destroying careers. Sources close to the Sterling family have revealed a shocking truth about the so-called genius Isla Evans, the journalist said. It appears her initial capital for Aurora Holdings didn't come from algorithms. It came from illegal gambling rings in Macau and data theft from the Chinese government. Isla laughed. "That's absurd. Who would believe that—" "Keep watching," Lucas said. The screen cut to a video interview. A man was sitting in shadow. His voice altered. "I knew her," the man said. "She stole the code. She stole the money. She's a criminal." Isla froze. She recognized the cadence of the voice. Even distorted, she knew it. "Julian," she whispered. Julian was her ex-partner. Not romantic business. He was a brilliant coder who had helped her build the first iteration of Aurora's AI. But he had gotten greedy. He tried to sell their user data to the highest bidder. Isla had fired him and blacklisted him from the industry 7 years ago. Victoria found him, Isla realized. She dug him up. "The stock is down 4% in after-hours trading," Lucas said. "And the SEC has just announced an inquiry based on anonymous tips." Isla stood up, pacing the room. "She wants to play dirty." "Fine." "What is the move?" Lucas asked. "The Met Gala is tomorrow night," Isla said. "The theme is gilded glamour. Victoria never misses the Met Gala. It's her Super Bowl." "She will try to humiliate you there," Lucas warned. "The press will be swarming." "I know." Isla smiled, but there was no humor in it. "That's why I'm going. And I need you to bring me the red file." Lucas's eyes widened slightly. "The red file, madam, that is nuclear." "Victoria started a fire," Isla said, looking out at the skyline of the city she now effectively owned. "I'm just going to pour gasoline on it." To the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art were a chaotic sea of velvet diamonds and flashing lights. When Victoria Sterling arrived, the crowd parted. She wore a gold and black gown that looked like armor. She smiled for the cameras, looking triumphant. She had leaked the story. She knew Isla was under investigation. She felt like the queen returning to her throne. Then the crowd went silent. A limousine pulled up. Not a Sterling car, a custom Rolls-Royce Phantom, matte black. The door opened and Isla stepped out. She wasn't wearing a traditional gown. She was wearing a dress made of a fabric that seemed to shift and flow like liquid starlight a proprietary material developed by Aurora's tech division. It glowed faintly in the dark. But it was what was around her neck that made people gasp. It was the Star of the East, a diamond necklace that had been missing for 50 years, rumored to be worth $100 million. Isla walked up the stairs, head held high. The reporters screamed her name. "Isla, is it true you stole the code?" "Isla." "Are you going to prison?" Isla ignored them. She walked straight up to where Victoria was posing for photos. Victoria sneered. "Bold of you to show your face. The SEC is raiding your offices as we speak." "Let them look," Isla said, leaning in close so only Victoria and the cameras could see them. "They'll find nothing but clean code and charity receipts, but you know who they should be looking at." Isla pulled a small, folded piece of paper from her clutch. "What is this?" Victoria asked. "This," Isla said, smiling for the cameras, "is a copy of a bank transfer from the Sterling Foundation charity account. $5 million. Transferred to a private account in the Cayman Islands. The account belongs to a Mr. Charles Davenport." Victoria's face went white. Charles Davenport was her secret lover and the rival CEO of Sterling's biggest competitor. "You've been funding our competition with charity money, Victoria," Isla whispered. "That's not just fraud. That's treason against the family." You wouldn't," Victoria stammered. "I already did," Isla said. "I sent it to the board this morning, and to the New York Times." At that exact moment, phones started buzzing in pockets all around them. A news alert was breaking. "Scandal at Sterling matriarch, accused of embezzlement." Victoria looked around. The photographers weren't snapping photos of her dress anymore. They were looking at her like she was a carcass. Liam appeared at the top of the stairs. He was looking at his phone. He looked up, locking eyes with his mother. The look of disgust on his face was the final nail in the coffin. Victoria swayed. She reached out to grab Isla's arm for support. Isla stepped back, letting Victoria fall to her knees on the red carpet. "Smile, Victoria," Isla said, looking down at her. "You're on camera," as security rushed to help the fallen matriarch. Isla felt a hand on her elbow. She turned, expecting Liam. It wasn't Liam. It was a man in a tuxedo, handsome in a rugged, dangerous way. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow. "Hello, Mouse," the man said. Isla's blood ran cold. Nobody called her Mouse. Only one person. The man from the diner. The man she had run away from 10 years ago. The man who was the real reason she had changed her name and built an empire of security. "Jax," Isla breathed. "You look expensive." Jax grinned, his eyes dead and cold. "I think it's time you paid your debts. The real ones." The flashbulbs at the Met Gala were blinding, but for Isla the world had gone dark. The noise of the crowd faded into a dull roar, leaving only the terrifying sound of Jax's voice. "Walk with me, Mouse." Jax said, his grip on her elbow firm, bordering on painful. "Smile. Don't make a scene. You know I hate scenes." Isla let him guide her away from the fallen Victoria and the swarming paparazzi toward a quiet alcove near the Egyptian exhibit. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Jax wasn't a corporate shark like Victoria. He was a shark of a different breed, a loan shark, a fixer, the kind of man who broke fingers first and asked questions. Never. 10 years ago, before MIT, before Aurora Isla had worked at a diner in South Boston that served as a front for his operations. She had been the bookkeeper, forced to cook the books to pay off her father's gambling debts. When she finally ran, she stole a hard drive containing incriminating evidence against his syndicate. That drive was the seed money for her first algorithm. She thought she had covered her tracks. "I thought you were in prison," Isla whispered, refusing to look at him. "Parole." Jack smirked, taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "And I see you've done well with the seed capital you borrowed. What do you want Jack's money? I can wire you 10 million right now. Just leave." Jax laughed softly. 10 million? That's cute. But no, I don't want your money, Isla. I want the algorithm. Isla froze. You can't have it. It controls global shipping lanes. It manages power grids. It's not a I have a buyer in Eastern Europe who thinks it would be a very fun toy. Jack said, his eyes darkening. You're going to give me the admin codes tonight. And if I don't, then I stop being polite. Jax nodded toward the entrance, where Liam was frantically scanning the crowd looking for Isla. Your husband looks soft, Mouse. Pretty boy. Rich boy. I wonder how he'd handle a few days in a basement in the Bronx. Isla turned on him, her eyes blazing. You touch him, and I will end you. You have until midnight, Jax whispered, leaning into her ear. Bring the drive to the old Navy Yard in Brooklyn. Warehouse 4. Come alone. Or the Sterling Heir becomes a headline in the obituaries. Jax pulled away, melting into the crowd like smoke. Isla stood trembling, the weight of her empire suddenly feeling like an anchor dragging her down. She turned to find Liam rushing toward her. Isla, my mother. The ambulance took her. What happened? What did you say to her? Liam looked frantic, torn between concern for his mother and confusion. Isla looked at him. She wanted to scream, to tell him everything, to beg for his help. But she couldn't. Jax had eyes everywhere. If she involved Liam, he was dead. She just fainted, Liam. Isla lied, her voice hollow. The stress. The scandal. Who was that man? Liam asked, narrowing his eyes. I saw you with a guy. You looked terrified. An old vendor, Isla said, pulling away. Listen, Liam, I have to go. There's a crisis at Aurora Servers. I have to go to the office. Now? Liam grabbed her hand. Isla, my mother just collapsed. Our marriage is falling apart, and you're leaving for work. I have to, she said, tears welling in her eyes. She pulled her hand free. I'm sorry, Liam. I'm so sorry. She ran down the museum steps, leaving her Cinderella slipper, or rather her $100 million reputation behind. Liam watched her go. He didn't buy it. He took out his phone and dialed a number. Lucas, Liam said into the phone. This is Liam Sterling. I know you work for her, but I need you to tell me the truth. Who was that man? There was a long silence on the other end. Mr. Sterling, Lucas said, his voice grave. You need to come to the headquarters, immediately. There is something you need to see. Isla didn't go to the office. She went to the warehouse. The Brooklyn Navy Yard was desolate at midnight. Fog rolled off the East River, obscuring the rusted cranes and skeletal structures of the old industrial age. Isla parked her car and stepped out, clutching a titanium drive in her hand. It didn't contain the algorithm. It contained a virus she had written in the car ride over a poison pill designed to fry whoever's system it was plugged into. It was a gamble. If Jax checked it before plugging it in, she was dead. She walked into Warehouse 4. It was vast, smelling of oil and rot. In the center, under a single hanging light bulb, sat a chair. Jax was leaning against a crate, holding a gun loosely in his hand. 2 thugs stood behind him. Punctual, Jax said. I like that. Put the drive on the chair. Isla walked forward and placed the drive on the seat. Let's be done with this, Jax. You get the drive, I get my life back. Jax picked up the drive. He tossed it to one of his men who plugged it into a rugged laptop sitting on a barrel. Checking it now, boss, the thug said. Jax pointed the gun at Isla. You know I almost admire you, Mouse. You fooled them all. The Sterlings, the Wall Street suits. But you never fooled me. You're still just a scared little girl running from her daddy's debts. I'm not running anymore, Isla said, standing tall. Boss, the thug said, frowning at the screen. The code. It's encrypting. It's locking me out. Jax's face twisted in rage. You think you're smart? He cocked the gun. I told you what would happen. I didn't bring Liam, Isla shouted. He's safe. This is between us. Is it? Jax whistled. From the shadows, a third thug dragged a figure forward. Isla screamed. It was Liam. He was bruised, his lip bleeding, his hands zip-tied behind his back. Liam. I picked him up right after you left the museum. Jax grinned. He was trying to follow you. Loyal puppy. Let him go. Isla lunged forward, but Jax fired a shot into the ground at her feet. She froze. The real code, Jax roared. Now, or I paint the floor with his brains. Liam looked up groggy but conscious. Isla, don't give him anything. Shut up. Jax struck Liam with the pistol whip. Isla was hyperventilating. She didn't have the code. The real code was stored on a server that required a biometric scan of her retina and a voice key. She couldn't just give it to him on a drive. I can't give it to you here, Isla cried. It needs a biometric unlock. I have to access the mainframe. Then we go to your office, Jax said. And if you try anything... Suddenly, the single light bulb above them exploded. The warehouse plunged into total darkness. What the hell? Jax shouted. Flashlights now. A high-pitched mechanical whine filled the air. It sounded like a turbine spinning up. Zzz. A blue laser grid scanned the room in a split second. What is that? One of the thugs screamed. Protocol Omega, Isla whispered, realizing what was happening. Lucas dropped from the rafters like a demon. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing tactical gear. He landed on the thug, holding the laptop, silencing him instantly. At the same time, the heavy bay doors of the warehouse blew inward, a swarm of drones. Aurora security drones, usually used for patrolling high-tech facilities, buzzed into the room, their spotlights blinding Jax and his men. Police! A voice amplified by a megaphone boomed from outside. Drop the weapons! Jax panicked. He grabbed Liam, using him as a shield, pressing the gun to his temple. Back off! I'll kill him! The drones hovered, their lights fixed on Jax. Isla saw her chance. She pulled a small device from her pocket, the kill switch for the warehouse's localized power grid, which she had purchased 5 minutes ago on her phone while walking in. Liam, duck! She screamed. She hit the button. An electrical arc from a nearby junction box exploded, sending a shower of sparks raining down on Jax. Startled, Jax flinched. Liam, fueled by adrenaline, slammed his head backward into Jax's nose. There was a sickening crunch. Jax stumbled back, dropping the gun. Isla didn't wait. She tackled Jax not with martial arts, but with the desperation of a wife protecting her husband. She kicked the gun away. Lucas was there a second later, his boot on Jax's throat. Stay down, Lucas growled. Liam fell to his knees, coughing. Isla scrambled over to him, her hands shaking as she touched his face. Liam, are you okay? He looked up at her. His eye was swelling shut, but he smiled. A crooked, painful smile. You really have a lot of secrets, he wheezed. Isla sobbed, burying her face in his neck. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Hey," Liam whispered, wincing as he hugged her back. "You saved me. I think that balances the ledger." 6 months had passed since the night the lights went out in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. The seasons had turned, and with them the very soul of the Sterling estate in the Hamptons had shifted. For decades, the property had been a fortress of manicured rigidity. Boxwood hedges trimmed to razor-sharp edges. Lawns so green they looked painted, and a silence that felt more like a museum than a home. It was a place designed to impress, not to inhabit. Now, as Isla stepped out onto the limestone terrace, the difference was breathtaking. The severe geometric gardens that Victoria Sterling had prized above all else were gone. In their place, Isla had commissioned a landscape architect to design a rewilding project. Native wildflowers, purple coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, and wild indigo swayed in the gentle Atlantic breeze. The air, once stagnant with the smell of chemical fertilizers, now buzzed with the lazy hum of bumblebees and the flutter of monarch butterflies. It wasn't just the ground that had changed. The roof of the sprawling carriage house now glittered with the sleek, dark glass of high-efficiency solar arrays, a prototype from Aurora's renewable energy division. It was a symbol of the new regime, modern, sustainable, and unapologetically efficient. Isla walked to the edge of the patio, wrapping her hands around a warm ceramic mug of herbal tea. She took a deep breath of the salt air. She wasn't wearing the armor of the trillion-dollar bride today. There were no Alexander McQueen power suits, no diamond chokers, and no terrifying heels. She wore a pair of soft, worn-in yoga pants and an oversized cashmere sweater that she suspected belonged to Liam. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, secured with a simple elastic band. For the first time in 10 years, she felt light. The constant crushing weight of looking over her shoulder, of waiting for Jax, for the SEC, for the next threat, had finally evaporated. "Madam," a familiar steady voice broke her reverie. Isla turned to see Lucas stepping through the French doors. As always, he was impeccable. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, his posture rigid. He held a tablet in one hand and a thick leather folder in the other. To the outside world, he was just an executive assistant. To Isla, he was the man who had stood between her and a bullet more times than she cared to count. "Good morning, Lucas," Isla said, smiling. "I told you to take the weekend off. The markets are closed." "The markets never truly close, madame," Lucas replied, though a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He walked over to the outdoor table and set the folder down. "However, I bring good news, not crises." "I like the sound of that," Isla said, sitting down. "Give me the headlines." Lucas tapped the tablet screen. "The Q3 earnings report for Sterling Aurora Ecologistics is being released to the public at noon. The preliminary numbers are staggering. We are up 40% year over year. The decision to pivot the fleet to electric autonomous trucks has not only slashed our overhead by half, but it has also secured us government contracts in 3 continents. The public sentiment analysis is at an all-time high. People don't just see Sterling as a shipping company anymore. They see it as a tech innovator." Isla nodded, tracing the rim of her mug. "And the integration, the Sterling employees. That is perhaps the greatest success," Lucas noted. "The retention rate is 95%. The pension fund you restored has earned you a loyalty that Victoria Sterling could never buy. They aren't working for a paycheck anymore. They're working for the vision." "Good," Isla said softly. "That's what matters." Lucas hesitated for a moment. his demeanor shifting slightly. He squared his shoulders. "There is one other item, Madam. The legal team received the final confirmation from the district attorney's office this morning regarding the incident in Brooklyn." Isla's hand tightened on her mug. "Jax, sentenced," Lucas said, his voice dropping an octave solemn and final. 25 years without the possibility of parole. Rico charges kidnapping, attempted murder, and high-level extortion. He is currently being processed at a maximum security facility in upstate New York. His network has been dismantled. The accounts have been frozen. The threat is extinguished. Isla closed her eyes and exhaled a long, shaky breath. She hadn't realized how much tension she was still holding in her jaw until that moment. Jax had been the boogeyman in her closet for a decade. He was the reason she had erased Isla Evans and built the fortress of Aurora. Knowing he was gone, truly gone, felt like waking up from a fever dream. "It's finally over," she whispered. "It is," Lucas confirmed. "And regarding your mother-in-law," Isla opened her eyes, a flicker of amusement returning. "Don't tell me she's trying to sue me again." "On the contrary," Lucas said. "We received a rather passive-aggressive email from her nurse in Boca Raton. Victoria is apparently tolerating the retirement condo you purchased for her. She complains daily about the humidity and the lack of decent caviar at the local grocery store, but she is cashing the allowance checks promptly on the 1st of every month." Isla laughed, a genuine bright sound. "Let her complain. As long as she stays in Florida and out of the boardroom, I'm happy to pay for her air conditioning." "Very good, Madame," Lucas said, picking up the folder. "The board meeting is scheduled for 10 minutes from now. We are connecting via video link. Shall I set up the screen here?" Before Isla could answer, the glass door slid open again. Isla's face softened instantly. Liam walked out, moving with a quiet caution that was unusual for him. Cradled in his arms, wrapped in a soft blue knitted blanket, was a sleeping infant. Liam looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes were prominent, but he looked happier than Isla had ever seen him. The tension that had defined their marriage during the secret months was gone, replaced by the exhausted camaraderie of new parenthood. "He's finally down," Liam whispered, easing himself into the chair next to Isla. "It took 3 rounds of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and a lap around the living room. But he's out." Isla leaned over, gazing down at their son, Alexander. He was tiny, perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and eyelashes that rested against his cheeks. He shifted slightly in his sleep, letting out a soft sigh, and Isla felt a surge of love so powerful it almost hurt. "He looks like you," Isla whispered, brushing a finger against the baby's hand. "He has your stubbornness," Liam countered with a grin. "He refused the bottle for 20 minutes. He clearly has management potential." Lucas cleared his throat politely. "Mr. Sterling, Madam, the board is waiting." Isla looked at the tablet, then back at Liam and Alexander. The choice wasn't even a choice. "Lucas," Isla said, not looking away from her family. "Cancel the video link." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Cancel it, Madidam. This is the quarterly review." "Send them a memo," Isla said firmly. "Tell them the chairwoman approves the report. Tell them the numbers are good, the strategy is sound, and to keep doing what they're doing. But I'm not coming to the meeting." "Isla," Liam said, surprised. "You live for these meetings." "I used to," Isla corrected him. She reached out and took Liam's free hand, interlacing her fingers with his. "I used to think that building the company was the only way to be safe. I thought if I had enough money, enough power, nobody could hurt me. But looking at this," she gestured to the baby and the garden, "I realize I was building the wrong kind of fortress." Liam squeezed her hand. So what are you saying you're retiring? Not retiring, Ela said thoughtfully. Just delegating. I trust the team. I trust Lucas. Lucas bowed his head slightly. I will convey your message to the board. He turned and walked back into the house, leaving them alone in the morning sun. Liam shifted the baby to his other arm and looked at Isla with a mischievous glint in his eye. You know, he said, if you have all this free time now, I've been thinking about my next project. Oh, Isla smiled. Are we talking about another wind farm, or maybe a solar grid for the city? Actually, Liam said, leaning back and looking up at the sky. I was thinking smaller. Much smaller. How small? A coffee shop, Liam said. Isla laughed. A coffee shop, you the heir to the sterling fortune. Why not? Liam shrugged. I'd find a nice little spot in the West Village. Exposed brick, good jazz music. Really expensive espresso machines. I could be the barista. You'd be terrible at it, Isla teased. You talk too much. Maybe. Liam grinned. But imagine this. A beautiful woman walks in. She's working on a laptop that looks like it's from 1999. She looks stressed, like she's carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. I accidentally spill an iced Americano on her keyboard. Isla felt a lump in her throat. Tears pricked her eyes as the memory washed over her. That day in the coffee shop, when she was terrified and alone, and a clumsy, kind-hearted stranger had stopped to help her. And then what happens? Isla asked, her voice trembling slightly. And then? Liam said, his voice thick with emotion, leaning in to kiss her forehead. I spend the rest of my life making it up to her, every single day. Isla leaned her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes. She listened to the sound of the ocean in the distance, the wind in the new wildflowers, and the steady breathing of her husband and son. She had spent her life fighting to become someone powerful. She had built walls of code and mountains of money. She had bought an empire to prove she wasn't worthless. But sitting there in the quiet morning light, Isla finally understood the truth. The empire wasn't the victory. The money wasn't the prize. This was. So what's the real takeaway here? Isla didn't just win because she had a secret bank account. She won because she understood that true power isn't about flashing wealth. It's about competence, resilience, and protecting the people you love. The Sterlings thought value was something you inherited. Isla proved that value is something you build. She let them underestimate her, and that was her greatest weapon. In a world full of Victorias, be an Isla. Stay quiet, work hard, and when the time is right, let the results scream for you. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of revenge romance and billion-dollar twists, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to hear more stories about underdogs taking over empires, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a part. What would you do if you found out your partner was secretly a billionaire? Would you be angry like Liam or thrilled? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.